Welcome to Scoreboard, the podcast that explores how athletes both current and retired define success beyond the game. Each episode dives into the mindset, financial decisions and career choices that shape their personal scoreboard, whether they're still in the arena or transitioning to life after sport. From victories to challenges, we reveal how athletes take charge of their own paths and decide what truly matters on their scoreboard of life. I'm your host, Chris Titley, and welcome to Scoreboard. Hi, it's Chris Titley here. On today's episode of Scoreboard, I'm joined by Mal Watts, CEO of the Brisbane Bullets, in person here in a beautiful Brisbane day. Mal, thanks for coming in.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me.
Mal, 2025, been a big 2025 for you. Do you want to talk about how your 2025 has started?
Yeah, it's been a full on, end of the NBL 24 season. We got off our head coach, which is always a tough and difficult decision. And then we set about appointing a new head coach, and we ran a really strict process to find someone that was already under the hood in our basketball advisor from the state, Stu Lash. So we made that appointment. A bit of conjecture with it, but we had we sat down with the members straight away after, and I gave them a lot more context. So I think the sentiment's changed to rather a positive one more recently, which is good. And
some big announcements here in Brisbane about the Olympics. How's that affected basketball? What do you think? And I suppose of the Bullets as well.
Yeah, I think, look, the Olympics one's been an interesting one. I know I personally had the first meeting some 4 years ago when I was back working in rugby at the time. I think over those 4 years, it's sort of been a moving target in terms of where we're going to land with events and hosting and whatnot. Basketball's probably still in that category, I'd say, at the moment. I know they've highlighted the potential to move some games down the Gold Coast with the opportunity for private sector to get involved and build an arena in the city. My view is that hopefully that gets up and running well and truly in time, and that we can have basketball back in the heart of the city.
And that's been obviously a decision as CEO. You've moved the Bullets out to Boondall. Was that one of the highest priorities at the start, or was it sort of a listen and learn process?
Yeah, look, if I go back to my time, and it's well documented, I don't have any basketball background, so I don't. I leave the X's and O's to the experts. But the big part. The big thing for me was just acknowledging where the Bullets were at, and they'd had a storied history. We've been around for over 50 years. Some legends in the game, still around Brisbane and living. Leroy Loggins, etc. But we needed to undo this sort of the ups and downs of what the Bullets have been known for the past decade. So the commitment that I came into was trying to, as you say, listen. Observe a lot in the first year. So I'm moving into my third season now. So if I look at the first season, it was doing a lot of observations and what was working, what wasn't working. And I think the difficult part when you're looking at an organisation that isn't humming, it always comes down to the people. So we made some changes there in the first season. So if I look back at that first season, definitely a rebuild is that phase. Was getting the people right, not just culturally, but also in terms of experience and expertise. Then we made some major moves, and instead of taking, years to set out a 3 or 5 year plan, which we still have in place, your fans and members don't give you that. They expect that, and so do we. We still have a mindset that we're doing everything we can to break into a plan and have a shot at a championship every year. But the likelihood of getting that right is very difficult. But so the second season was major projects. We moved to the entertainment centre, and we built a high performance centre back in the heart of the city at South Bank, which has paid dividends in terms of getting the Brisbane Bullets profile, back in the city. Our players are back, in and around easily identifiable characters, and that leads us to this next phase now, which is all about execution. We've got no excuses now. We've got all the fundamental pieces in play for us to grow, to prepare well, and that's where we are today.
Mel, you touched on the Bullets, the players, some of the Leroy Loggins, the Ronnie Ratcliffes of the world, etc. The age group that I'm in, 44, went there for my 8th, 9th birthday, etc. Loved obviously the Brisbane Bullets, then very successful in their championship. How much of the past do you kind of need to kind of make this club a legacy for everyone to be part of the Bullets again?
Oh, it's a massive part. I think I can credit probably my rugby background and understanding how important your past players are and your past player network. So there's a few things I have been able to bring throughout my career over to basketball that I think I can lean into. And I mean, you touched on it then. The people, the market that we want to buy tickets for their kids are in their 40s who, their connection to the Bullets for your Leroy Loggins, your Roger Smiths.
Robert Sibley, Derek Rucker, Andre Moore, John Dodge, Larry Sandstone.
So look, it's my first move when I got the gig was, was reaching out to Leroy. I had heard that Leroy had been distant from the club, in recent years, and I took him for a steak at the Norman. Just explained to him I didn't need anything from him, but from my travels, everyone loves him, adores him, and the club is his club, and he should be welcomed with open arms. And he trusted me, and he came to one game, he came to two games, and he doesn't miss many games. And with that, he's able to bring along a lot of the other past players that had probably been disengaged too. So we had a past player function the other night. 18 months ago, we had 6 turn up to that. We had well over 20 turn up, and we went for, we took them through the high performance center, and we had another steak and a beer and a wine at the Plough Inn. So it was a good night.
And Mal, I recently had a chat to Jenny Sagar, the new WNBL CEO, and we talked about the grassroots basketball over the last decade and just the popularity from a point of view from kids. And there's not enough courts and there's not enough referees, and you're seeing the private schools and the public schools and everyone's playing basketball and talking basketball. Can you describe whether that's a threat or an opportunity, or how do you see it as in terms of the popularity of the grassroots sport?
I'd probably talk to my own personal experience. I think when the ownership reached out to me about considering the role of CEO of the Brisbane Bullets, not coming from basketball, and even the perception of I had a pretty poor perception of where the Bullets were at. Went home, started thinking about my son. He was 14 at the time and grew up heavily in contact sport, which this country is dominated by, AFL, rugby league. In the last couple of years, he had been hassling us at Christmas about buying the NBA kits. He's got plays 2K. He independently joined the school team, joined a club. And I was thinking about the same group of mates he's got, and they're all doing the same thing. I thought there was something in that. So, I did a bit of my own research, and I was quite in awe of what I found was happening with the NBL in terms of the growth. And I mean growth in participation at grassroots level was astronomical. In southeast Queensland, I think in that 48-month period, there was went from 24,000 participants to over 85,000 in 2 years. The NBL was growing at a rate at 40% year on year. So there's no code in Australia's history that is growing at the rate that basketball is. Why is that? I think we're going through another big cultural shift that we experienced in the 90s with the Jordan era. But I don't think and I wouldn't say that was a flash in the pan, but I think this is going to be a real sustained shift. The other part too is I think that the parents now are a lot more educated in considering the challenge that you do have with contact sport. And I think the CTE and the head knocks has been a major factor in that younger participation. And look, the other kicker is we've always been a really, gender equal sport at the grassroots level. The boys and girls, there's a really fair spread of teams in both age groups, and the product's fantastic.
Yeah, you touched on the CTE and the head knocks, etc. And you come from a rugby background and been very involved in rugby. That it was about 10 years ago, I think, where there was multiple injuries in 1 year from the kids. And from my point of view and from a parent point of view, I don't think rugby's almost recovered from that particular year, which was just an anomaly. Basketball's all weather, it's mixed, it's indoors, etc. I suppose, and you've got the access to the US. Back in my day, you didn't have that. You had probably half an hour at midday on a Saturday trying to get the top 10 players of the week and on a VHS. How important has content been, and also the access to the US, the NBA?
Well, I think if you look, there's a great example as you look at what rugby league's trying to do with their first round in Las Vegas every year. Again, something that opened my eyes up was how I was shocked at how close the NBA was to the NBL. I hosted probably 40 NBA scouts from teams last year in Brisbane that came from all the major NBA teams. that we're seen as the second league to the NBA. So all eyes are on, but our connections run deep. Even throughout in Brisbane, our ownership, we've got a number of ex-NBA players that are part of the ownership group, Hall of Famers, and all eyes are on. So I think if you think about Australian sporting culture or even just Australian culture, we do look to the States as aspiration, and the NBL is right front and centre. With our connection to the NBA, a couple of the teams go over and play NBA games every year. This year we've got I think the Pelicans are coming to play
in Melbourne.
In Melbourne. Yeah. So it's that aspiration. It's a really strong connection we have, which I think places NBL quite uniquely. And if you look at the other the codes.
Speaking of the other codes, you've got NRL, which Australia is predominantly on a global scale very good. You've got AFL, which is just Australian-based, broadly speaking, in terms of there's no World Cups, etc. But then you've got basketball and its American influence. People got to accept that a bit more now versus like we've got the bronze medal, the Olympics as well. The Boomers and the Opals are up there with the world's best. But is that important for them to keep performing and succeeding, to be sort of patriotic?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think last year we had 5 NBL players draft in the might have been top 50 in the NBA draft. The second highest pick came from Perth. So when you're out, if you're outside of the basketball environment, you probably are somewhat unaware of how strong the NBL is and how it's recognised globally. And as I said, I think when you look to success in those heroes, have Australian talent, local talent, being picked up and flying the flag for us in the NBA. I mean, you look at Josh Giddey is doing a wonderful job.
Dyson Daniels might be defensive player of the year potentially.
And that's got to translate back to the Boomer squad. And I think that's important for any code, on a global level, is that if you've got your national team performing, it just enhances your grassroots and the kids' aspirations and why they want to don on a singlet and jump on a court.
And Mal, your background, you mentioned that you hadn't watched a game of basketball, broadly speaking, before taking the role. Your leadership style, what culture do you want to bring to the Bullets?
Yeah, look, I'd say I'm fairly eccentric. If you listen to me rabbit on, I've had many different careers. I think that's put me in a unique position in terms of how I lead. I take a lot of learnings from a lot of different industries I've been involved in. I had a tech. I was software developing, accounting background. I was a rescue crewman with Westpac Helicopter as a young man. Then I moved into hospitality for a large part of my time, and then my entry to sport. So, and then I always circle back to my humble beginnings. My mum and dad had a small business in a regional area. So I look at all those different facets that I've learned and I've picked up over the years. So if I take that back into my leadership style, I feel like I've got a unique way I go about things. I think I have I've got the skill set to lead by example. I think I'm quite a good strategic thinker. I'm also got quite a creative flair. But when it all boils down to it, though, there's not one job in any organisation that I probably haven't done or I don't have the ability to do, and I'm happy to roll the sleeves up. So, yeah, I lead by example. I think a lot of my staff will see me doing the jobs that they wouldn't normally see CEOs do. It doesn't mean I get burdened down with it, but it's important that they can look to their left and right and know that they know that I'm working beside them on their hip and I've got their backs.
And in terms of a checklist, what a successful club looks like, what's your view on that?
Yeah, look. In my time in sport, and I look at, I'm a big networker, so I've always reached out. When I went to sport, I reached out, and I've had a lot of experiences in connecting with other codes, not just the one that I worked in, but. I saw a lot of things there that exist in a lot of sporting organisations, in all codes that may not exist in successful businesses. So I think I'm very passionate about the business of sport. I think in terms of success in sport, the key things for me and the challenge is that you're looking for diamonds a lot of the time in the people that are involved. You need to have a care for the cause because we ask a lot of our people. I think you need to have not necessarily be passionate about the game, but you need to have a passion around sport and a level of involvement that gives you joy. You need to be, more importantly or equally important is to be really focused on what your core role is and be really passionate about bringing that, that skill, that desire to be better day in, day out. And that's what I talk about the diamonds. Sometimes in sport you can have it swayed too much where you might look around the room and it's more fan-orientated people that you have in roles and ex-athletes. There's nothing wrong with us ex-athletes, but if you've brought a ex-athlete in that's recently retired with not 10 years of building a skill set in that role, but then they sit as a decision maker, that can be challenging in terms of the course. So I think the key thing is getting the right people in the roles, but still having people that are really passionate about the game and their contribution to it.
And in terms of the pools of people wanting to watch sport in Brisbane, we've got the Lions that are doing very well, we've got the Reds, you've got the Broncos, you've got all the other in baseball, you've got a lot of different competitors, quote unquote, to get that dollar to go to the game. What would the Bullets going to do to make that game day experience good and forget people that are maybe not au fait too much with the basketball to become a convert?
Look, I think it's as a parallel. I'd give you an example of Stradbroke Island or Moreton Island. 75% of Brisbane people haven't been to those islands. You just need to go once, and then you're hooked.
Yep.
The NBL and certainly what we've developed in Brisbane and the Brisbane Bullets now is exactly that strategy. We have, I think, it's unique in that we're able to, with a closed roof and a really tight setup, you're right on top of the action versus stadia. But the way I always articulate is if you're into basketball, great. But if you'll enjoy rock concerts and theatre and dance, we've got something for everyone. So because we're in a closed arena, we put on the best show in town. That's not just a sales pitch. As I said, if you haven't been, just come to one game. That's how we'll grow. But there's something for everyone. The unique proposition we have, and what I found is that when I look up in the stands, 30% or more of our attendees are young kids. What does that mean? Well, it translates into the atmosphere. So when we're asking kids to engage, and the beauty of basketball is there's a lot of short stoppages that we have opportunities to do something fun and engaging and different. So that's happening all game. And you ask kids to engage and participate, they do. They're on their feet, they're dancing, they're clapping, and what happens is it becomes infectious to the adults. So normally, a parent, or certainly I'll use me as an example, an old dad, I might be sitting there watching a game like this, but then all of a sudden all these kids are around you and you see other adults starting to engage. So you have full engagement of everyone in the arena. Whatever we ask them to do, and that's my point. I think it allows parents or adults to drop their guards and just enjoy the moment with their families.
We've seen some sports evolve, like cricket, from test matches to the product of 2020, to go to the Gabba. As you mentioned, in between each ball, there's a little bit of music in the background. There's a little bit of a chant going on. The kids are engaged. Has basketball evolved? Are there new products? Is there new ways of thinking around the game as well?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the game, I don't think the game needs to change much because it's fast-paced, it's end-to-end. The NBL's tagline's every moment matters, and it goes down to the last 15 seconds, almost every game. So the product in itself is extremely exciting. But the evolution of the game day presentation is huge. And I think, again, what was it when I came into the NBL? It was the template's there. It's the NBA. So that's what we did. We were able to work with Stadiums Queensland, ASM Global, all invested heavily to bring our game day product up to a high standard. So if you go to a Brisbane Bullets game now, it's much closer to what you expect when you see an NBA game. We've got the largest Jumbotron, which is your big LED screens in the middle of the court. We've got a blimp flying around. We've got flamethrowers. I designed and built a 3-story pub on the baseline, which is good for Queenslanders, called the Cause Champions Club. So really is something for everyone. I think the challenge with sport these days is that as a sports administrator, you are trying to provide something to everyone, and that doesn't always hit for the traditionalists. So with traditionalists, prefer to just be ingrained in the game, and sometimes that the flames going off or the music's too loud. It's a challenging environment to get right, and that's why I always talk about it being a real science. You really need to understand your consumer, and have a really good mix of what we're trying to offer on a game day. So at the end of the day, the end goal, win, lose or draw, is that when you're jumping in the car to go home, you've had a great night out and you feel like you've had good value for money.
And coming from a bit of a tech background, there must be a lot of data points that you've got over the last couple of years as the CEO. How important has been, to look at that, to analyse that, and to sort of nut down and say, like, well, this needs improvement, or this is where the market's at.
Well, that in essence is the business of sport. I think a lot of fans and consumers will see the front end, but behind all the major sporting codes, it's data led. And it ties into consumer behaviour, memberships, ticketing purchases. As an example, that's what drove our decision to move back to the entertainment centre. There was a lot of noise around why that would be a bad move. We just went back to the data. So we overlaid ticketing data, historic ticket purchases. We work with BQ on where the participation, hotspots were. And we found there was a heavy spike around that northern corridor out towards, Boondall Way. So then we polled in the Courier Mail, and that gave us a 75% surety that decision to move to the entertainment centre would be well supported. And we found that in our first year, I think we had attendances increased by about 24%.
And members, the Broncos have sort of a bit of a blueprint about membership from 1988 onwards. The members have been strong. The Lions are now ticking up. Can you talk about the importance of that, the benefits, what people do and get as members, and I suppose with the cost of living where it is now, the price point which basketball's playing at?
Yeah, look, I think it's an interesting one. We've got quite a spread. I mean, the courtside seating is your most premium seating. So if you compare the courtside seating to other codes, it's up there, but your experience is second to none.
You can't be sort of courtside, right, broadly speaking, in a rugby game and cricket game.
But then you got your spread right down, and you're in an arena. There's no bad seats. Yep. If you talk about the nosebleeds in stadia compared to an arena, you're right on top of it. And we got prices starting from as little as $10. So you need to have a good spread, and you need to be able to accommodate everyone, especially in a cost of living. In terms of memberships, it's important to be flexible with your payment plans. Spread them out so the burden isn't as hard to the hip pocket up front. Work with people. I think don't be as hard lined on it, and really when I say work with them, help them. Help them be able to afford it, and that just comes down to membership engagement. I think that the key thing with members, your value proposition is obviously they want to get their seat, and they want to secure it and have look forward to coming to every game and feeling almost like there's a level of ownership over being a member. But at the same time, we really need to have a lot more engagement. I think that's key. And from administrators, sure, but I think it's around making a commitment from your coaches and your players that we're engaged and a lot more involved in terms of that. See, feel, touch, talk. I think if you can allow your fans to be in contact and have organic discussions or relationships with your players, it makes them more sticky. They feel more valued, and certainly young kids. And I think that's the advantage of us living. I think kids that grow up in the metro areas, that there's a lot more opportunity to access their heroes. So I think, we want to really lean more into that. I think I would have liked to have done a lot more in recent times. But I think this next season for us, I said it's an all-in mindset, and if we can be out in the community, clubs, schools as much as possible, I think that just ties back into your membership experience as well.
One sign of and we've talked a lot about the off court stuff and the off field stuff, but you're getting back to the on-field performance and how that matters. The successful teams that I followed through my career, you can name the players. You can name the players because they might have been there for 5 years. You've had a pretty consistent team. And looking at the Brisbane Lions now, a lot of people can sort of know the players because they've been there for 5 years and the team hasn't changed. How important is that for you? How important is the success on the court for the Bullets, and what your aspirations, and how you can say next year, yes, we want to win the title, but realistically, is there a little step-by-step increment change, or are we going to sort of like this is a 3-year plan?
Yeah, look, I think there's a couple of answers to that. I think, and I'll come back to the one around continuity is key. And if you look at the Brisbane market, it's a fickle market. We know that. We should respect that. But if you're not winning, they generally don't turn up. And I think the challenge the challenge with that, and this is where I go back to the theme of this discussion. It really, the way I attack it is the business of sport and understanding that. So every year we're obviously going to set out to try and win a championship. But the business reality is that, if you look at the data, 1 in 10 years, most teams in any code get that opportunity, right, to deliver that. So what do you do for the other 9? Right? So I think when you look at if you just go, we're just going to, we're going to go all in on a playing group and that's what's going to guarantee us the title. It's not the case. So bringing your sponsors in, leaning into membership, leaning into community, all those pieces underwrite the business to help you get through that year in case you fall short. That's a big part of what I've experienced and seen maybe some other sporting clubs get it wrong, where you just load up on one strategy that works for 1 year out of 10. So I look at it that way as a blueprint in terms of the business foundation, is that we need to be looking at all the other areas that can shore up the business side of things and still put us in a position to put the right pieces in play to go after a championship. Which then comes back to, what does that look like? It's continuity. In any sporting code, the more that the players are familiar with each other, they get used to each other's game and how they play, is where it starts becoming in those really tight moments where instinct takes over. And I can talk about rugby and rugby league and see the guys where they're popping that pass and they're just coming through on the hip. Basketball's exactly the same. It's where the instinct kicks in and takes over in those moments where it's the pass or the lob, because they know that their teammate's going to be there. That just comes with time, right? So we look at where we're at now in the Brisbane Bullets, and I think that's part of this, where we've been, is that we haven't really had that continuity in place. So even though we've changed our head coach and everyone thought, well, maybe it's a big rebuild, it was far from it. We looked at that around the continuity being the key in how we we put ourselves in a position for this next season. So we contracted 5 of our players that we believe in over the next 3 years are going to be really key to us. We've got opportunities with the 2 imports we brought in last year and mutually, potentially coming back. And we've got some big moves to make now in the free agency period to complement that roster. Then you look at our coaching group. Feedback we had with our 2 assistant coaches that they're potentially 2 of the best in the league. Certainly the players also agree with that approach. And then you bring in a new head coach, which has been with the club for 2 full seasons as the senior basketball advisor.
Yeah. Yep.
And he's watched every game. He's contracted. He's built the roster. And you start looking at it that way, and it may be a little bit left of field, but I always look at, there's a gamble in bringing a brand new coach in, and a brand new coach will want to bring his own people, which means you've got 2 great assistant coaches that you want to empower and get more out of, but they go out the door, and it is a reset. So for us, I think we're on that. If we look at the next phase now, I think the next 3 years is now. I think we've spent the last 2 seasons getting the foundations right. Our culture is fantastic, and people throw that out there. But if there's one strength of mine, it is being able to bring the right people in that, all different personality types, but they complement each other, but they all have the same underlying work ethic and theme. So there's integrity is key in everything I do, and there's a lot of values that we, when we're bringing people into the business now, the organisation, they must tick those boxes. So I feel like we're in a really strong position. I think we've gone about it the right way. And as I said, when my head hits a pillow at night, why did I take this job? It's to back myself to be the guy that can help, with a team to change the narrative of the Brisbane Bullets and bring an amazing club back to greatness. And I think Brisbane needs that too. I think it's no disrespect at all. I mean, love and admire the Broncos, and even you see what the Dolphins doing and the Lions, but there's room for one more. As Stu says, there's room at the table, and I think that's what everyone in the club at the moment is so passionate about, is getting this right for Brisbane.
And Mal, you touched on the long-term game, but also the short-term plays to get to that long-term continuity, as you described. How important is it to educate the sponsors or oncoming sponsors to be a bit more long-term thinking, as opposed to a smash and grab 1 year? We're going to blitz the Bullets, and they finished 7th, so therefore next year we're out.
Well, look, this is something I'm really passionate about. It's your commercial partnership space. Again, a lot of the research I did in my early days coming to sport and exists in all codes, and it was a big part of where I think the ownership, I probably tipped the balance for them to go all in on me, is that when I came into sport, I think there's definitely the way that commercial sponsorships can work, and certainly if you've got a lot of broadcast revenue and you're successful clubs, it's a very transactional approach. You end up with probably salespeople pitching to a potential sponsor, grabbing, just assuming it's all brand, putting the logo there and taking a lot of money for it, not really servicing well, popping up then for renewal, and the sponsor going, well, we see things a bit differently. So you have high churn, high attrition, leads to then you're stuck in that sales mindset of just pitching and pitching and pitching. The sponsorship education's really key, but it's also the integrity of the deals you do. So, I found that the success I had in my time in sport came down to taking I don't think it's rocket science, but a pure business approach where sit and listen to what the core objectives that the sponsor wants and how they're going to value that sponsorship. Then go away and build a strategy with the assets you've got to then reposition that based on their budget. And once you got that signed off and that sponsor's ready to go, then it's all about servicing. Do what you say you're going to do and actually overdo it. Don't be afraid to do a little bit more to earn the right for a renewal. And where you want to get to, continuity, you want to get the right sponsors in the room, so the right brands, the right alignment, and you want to renew and get that sponsor that you can look back and go, they've been with the club for 5 years, 8 years, getting that 10-year period. What happens over that time? It becomes organic. The sponsors get to know the other sponsors. They start working and doing business with each other. It's just getting that right. We didn't have that right at the Bullets. The sponsors, we had great sponsors, but we weren't set up to service them well, and we didn't have that strategy in place. It was very much a transactional, and that's where we're finding, the last 2 seasons, and I know we've talked about it, is you see now that the Bullets are coming out of nowhere, and people starting to acknowledge the club, talk about the club, and we're starting to sign, some pretty significant sponsors. And I'll give that a plug. We're always looking for more, to join us. But that's been pretty fundamental in what I observed. And I think, again, when you hear me talk about it, it's not rocket science, but it's just the nature of sport. It's not a delivery model that a lot of sporting clubs actually run with.
And you're a natural networker too, so I think bringing those businesses together and networking together with a common interest like the Lions Connect and a few different initiatives that people do around getting business leaders and people that are putting their money to enjoy their game, being over-serviced over a long period of time, again, the check's an easy renewal, right? It's not a question over the renewal.
No, look, that's something that's always come naturally. I mean, I was the kid that got on with everyone and could talk underwater, but yeah, I've got to credit my rugby background in that. It's growing up in rugby union, the rugby networks are strong. It's not just if I introduce someone to someone, but that's how we connected, right? At a whiskey bar with a couple of our rugby mutual mates, yep. And here we are. So, but
plug out to Malt Dining in Charlotte Street, I think it is.
The thing with the rugby network is that it's if someone asks me for an introduction, the unspoken rule is that contact in mind will know that they have to deliver value to that person. That's what I found that rugby. Gave me some insight into the strength of a network. There's a network, we have contacts, but it's being able to take that one step further. So that's why I look back at why those networks are so strong in rugby union, is that, again, it's just been built up over generations that that introduction provides. So, look, that ethos is what I've now been able to bring into my business life and now into what I do with the Bullets and basketball.
And Mal, on previous podcasts, I've talked about the Scoreboard moment, which is a moment in your life which is pretty pivotal. It's something which may have changed the direction, or it's something you remember in terms of your business life or your personal life, etc. Mal, what's your Scoreboard moment?
Geez, just one, hey? Look, it's without a doubt, it's meeting my wife. And give you context to that. I mean, we should all say that, shouldn't we? Well, firstly, I think she's one in a million. But we grew up in the Northern Rivers of New South Wales, and the template there is you don't leave. It's God's country. It's beautiful. It's still home. But I definitely had just this underlying desire to want more. as I said, I had humble beginnings. I had fantastic parents that worked their backsides off to give me an education, myself and my brother. And the template was to live and work and die there. And we probably will go back there and finish that last bit off. But my wife gave me the confidence that when an opportunity came along to break away from home and what was supposed to be the blueprint, and I took an opportunity to go and play rugby in England, and as very amateur rugby, but it gave me an opportunity to broaden my horizons, and that's when I think I had that my business career really took off. That's where my tech and accounting background led me to a director of a company in the UK, which we later sold to Reuters. But she's been my biggest supporter. Without her, I don't think I've had such a varied journey, but it all comes back to that moment, to be able to, to meet someone that gives you that confidence to give everything a go. And so I credit it all to her.
That's a great answer. My new question for people is, what's the sporting moment in your life that you'll never forget?
I've got a couple. I think I actually have a few. I'll just roll them out. Growing up as a clubby back in the Northern Rivers, Trevor Hendy, he was my hero. There was a moment there, I don't know if it was national finals, where he was I think he was in the back of the field. I'm sure it's a ski leg, and he came off it, and the skis, it was a massive swell, and sure enough, Hendy's popped out in the whitewash and body surfed the wave to the beach, and we just thought, just incredible moment. From rugby, it's a negative one, but I'll take it as that. Certainly suffered the 2003 World Cup, which is but I had the pleasure of being at Twickenham with my three oldest rugby friends from Alstonville and their dad, who was our coach, Big Jono, Ian Johnson, and we're all dressed in our Dryser Bones, and I should say this, we snuck some red wine in Dryser Bones, and we had the pleasure of kicking England out of their own World Cup in the pool stages. I took a lot of pleasure in that. I know that sounds a bit sick, but it's true. And then the 2021 Queensland Reds domestic final, COVID really, it took a battering to sport. It was a really couple tough years working as an administrator. I think back to those times and the support I had as a leader amongst my teams, and what they did, and certainly the club and what we went through to deliver 42,000 people, into Suncorp Stadium. I think it was the biggest domestic rugby crowd in a decade, and it finished with my son as the ball boy, on the pitch at the end. So that was pretty special as well.
Hopefully there's a lot more special moments coming up in basketball and with the Bullets. And one of my moments is when Gazy lost it when the Boomers won the bronze medal a few years ago. So lots of sporting moments to cherish, and also in the future. Mal Watts, thank you so much for being part of Scoreboard, the podcast. Very much enjoyed the chat about your life, how you came into basketball as the CEO of the Bullets, the plans for the future, how you're going currently. Wish you all the best, and look forward to catching up.
You're a good man, mate. Thanks for having me on, Chris. Appreciate it.